Alright, let's dive into something that's been making headlines lately, and trust me, it's a doozy. Imagine two neighbors, let's call them Country A and Country B, who've been friends for decades, trading goods, sharing resources, and generally getting along. But then, one day, Country A's leader starts calling Country B nasty, not just once, but repeatedly. Sounds like a soap opera, right? Well, this is real life, and it's happening between the US and Canada. Personally, I think this whole situation is a masterclass in how not to handle international relations, but let's break it down. What makes this really interesting is the context. Canada, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney, has been in the crosshairs of President Trump's trade war. Trump's been throwing around words like nasty to describe Canada's leadership, which, in my opinion, feels more like a personal attack than a strategic negotiation tactic. I mean, if you take a step back and think about it, calling a country nasty isn't exactly the kind of diplomacy that builds trust. It's almost like Trump is trying to bully Canada into submission, but here's the thing, Canada isn't backing down. Carney's response? He laughs it off and keeps the focus on what really matters, Canadian jobs and businesses. That's a level of composure I find really fascinating. Now, let's talk tariffs. Trump's been threatening to slap a 50% tariff on more Canadian goods, and this isn't just about steel and aluminum anymore. What many people don't realize is that tariffs are essentially a tax on consumers. When companies face higher import costs, they pass those costs on to us, the buyers. So, while Trump claims this will bring manufacturing back to the US, the reality is that it's making everyday goods more expensive for Americans. From my perspective, this raises a deeper question: is this trade war actually achieving its goals, or is it just creating more problems? One thing that immediately stands out is how Canada has handled this. Instead of escalating the rhetoric, Carney has kept the focus on the bigger picture. He's not just defending Canada's interests, he's pointing out the broader implications of these tariffs. For example, he mentioned that US tariffs on aluminum have led to a 58% increase in aluminum prices in the US. What this really suggests is that these policies aren't just hurting Canada, they're hurting American businesses and consumers too. It's a detail I find fascinating because it shows how interconnected our economies are. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st US state have rubbed a lot of Canadians the wrong way. Personally, I think that's a pretty tone-deaf statement. Canada has its own identity, its own culture, and its own pride. Suggesting it should just merge with the US feels like a dismissal of everything Canada stands for. And it's not just talk, Canadians are actually canceling trips to the US because of this tension. That's a tangible impact on the US economy, and it's something Trump might want to think about. If you take a step back and think about it, this whole situation is part of a bigger trend in global politics. We're seeing more and more leaders using economic coercion as a tool of diplomacy, and it's not just the US and Canada. Carney called out this behavior at the World Economic Forum, and Trump's response was, well, let's just say it wasn't very diplomatic. But what this really highlights is the fragility of international relationships. When leaders prioritize scoring political points over cooperation, everyone loses. In my opinion, the most important takeaway here is the human cost of these policies. Behind all the numbers and tariffs are real people, workers, business owners, and families who are feeling the impact. Carney's emphasis on protecting Canadian jobs isn't just political rhetoric, it's a reminder that these decisions have real consequences. And while Trump might see this as a fight for American dominance, I think it's a fight that's ultimately hurting both sides. So, what's the bigger question here? Is this trade war worth it? Are the short-term political gains worth the long-term damage to relationships and economies? Personally, I think it's time for a different approach, one that focuses on collaboration instead of confrontation. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below.